Hey guys, welcome back. I hope you are having an amazing day. Let's get right into the stories. The first one is an entitled People Story. I own a small manufacturing company that makes custom furniture and wood products. We're located just outside the city limits in an industrial park area. I bought the property and built the facility years ago, before the surrounding neighborhoods were developed. Back then, it was just empty land around my building. But over the last decade, a bunch of new subdivisions popped up nearby. Fancy houses, manicured lawns, the whole 9 yards. And of course, with these fancy new neighborhoods came a homeowners association or homeowners association. I didn't think much about the homeowners association at first. My property wasn't part of their subdivision, so what did I care what rules they had for themselves? Boy, was I wrong. It started with a letter in the mail saying I owed their homeowners association over $5,000 in dues and fines for failure to maintain my property to their standards. $5,000 for what? I called them right away to explain the mistake. I wasn't part of their association and didn't owe them a dime. The woman on the phone was rude and dismissive. She insisted my property was under their jurisdiction and I had 30 days to pay before further action was taken. I wrote them a letter reiterating that I was not part of their homeowners association and owed them nothing. I included copies of my property deed and business documents proving I owned the land long before their homeowners association existed. I figured that would settle the matter. Again, I was wrong. A few weeks later, I arrived at work to find the gates to my property crashed open and my loading dock doors forced open. Inside, shelves were overturned, inventory strewn about, and there was graffiti on the walls saying, "Pay your dues, deadbeat." I was furious. I called the police to file a report for the break-in and vandalism. The responding officer sighed when I mentioned the homeowners association and said this wasn't the first complaint about them harassing nearby businesses and properties. He suggested I get a restraining order and sent a copy of his report to the homeowners association with an official warning. I also installed security cameras in case they tried anything else. It was just in time, too, because the very next day, a bunch of homeowners association officers showed up at my property and started snooping around. The cameras caught them peeking in windows and trying to get inside. I strode out and confronted them, demanding they leave immediately. Their leader got in my face, claiming they were conducting an inspection to verify I paid the mandatory homeowners association dues. Mandatory? I told them to get lost and that I was filing a restraining order against the homeowners association. They shouted threats as they left, saying I'd regret crossing them. True to my word, I filed a restraining order against the homeowners association, citing the failed intimidation attempts and the break-in resulting in vandalism. I also took them to small claims court, seeking damages for the destruction of property and lost inventory. In court, the homeowners association president testified that because my building was visible from their subdivision, they could set rules for my property's appearance. She argued that I was hurting property values by not maintaining their standards. Therefore, mandatory homeowners association dues applied whether I joined or not. I presented my original property deed, business documents, and the police reports. I explained that I owned the land long before the homeowners association existed. I was not a member, and they had no jurisdiction over my private commercial property whatsoever. The judge ended up ruling fully in my favor. She scolded the homeowners association for their bullying tactics, unlawful attempts to impose fees, and the vandalism. She awarded me damages to cover repairs, updated security, legal fees, and lost revenue from the business disruption. The homeowners association president turned red as a beet, but could do nothing but storm out as we won the case. In the end, I decided to sue the homeowners association directly for harassment and seeking punitive damages. The lawsuit ended in a settlement where they paid triple my claimed losses. It still didn't make up for the aggravation they caused, but it felt good to stick it to those arrogant homeowners association bullies. As part of the settlement, they signed legal documents acknowledging my property was not part of their association. They can no longer set foot on my land without permission. If they so much as look at me wrong, I can have their homeowners association board jailed for contempt. I used some of the settlement money to put up a giant fence around my property with security cameras every 10 feet. Let's see them try to pull this crap again. I almost wish they would, so I could have their smug homeowners association president thrown in prison. But hopefully they learned their lesson and will leave me and my business in peace from now on. The moral of the story: don't let homeowners associations bully you just because they think their rules apply to everyone. Know your rights, stand your ground, and hit them where it hurts: their wallets. The next one is a pro-revenge story. I had a job working warehouse delivery for a store. The entire corporate structure was built on treating the people below you like crap, and that was passed down through every level. Managers would just bark orders and idiot you out for any reason they could think of. They paid about 25 cents over minimum wage, and the bosses drove BMWs and Mercedes. The big boss lived in an $8 million house. Our store was the freight hub for 4 others in the little chain, so we got to know the drivers from the other stores well, as they were always coming to load freight or drop stuff off. One day we're sitting with 2 drivers from another store, and Buddy remarks that he and his partner are working over 60 hours a week. I say he must be doing okay with all that overtime pay. He says they're not getting OT, just paid a straight time rate. I ask him if he signed an averaging agreement. He says no. He shows me his pay stub, and there it is. His partner comes back and confirms all this, and they've been doing it for months. He'd asked his manager about OT, and been told that straight pay was just the way it worked. I tell them that's illegal and urge them to take it to labor relations. They're reluctant to rock the boat, figuring they'll be fired, so I drop it. We never got any overtime. Our warehouse was busy, our store was not. A couple months later, they're in again, and Buddy's partner tells us he and his girlfriend are moving back east, and he's giving his notice. I tell him again to file a complaint. Nothing to lose now, so he does. A few weeks go by, and when I come in one day, there are expensive boss cars parked all along the loading dock. My workmate says something big is going down. All the managers have been summoned and are inside with a bunch of people in suits, so we wander upstairs to see what's going on. The company bookkeeper had an office in our store and handled all the payroll. He was a Chinese immigrant, nice guy. The bosses were trying to pin this on him, saying he didn't speak English very well, which was true, and had obviously screwed everything up. Turns out he was a pretty cagey guy. He knew what they told him to do was illegal and was able to produce all the records of him telling them that, and of them telling him to basically just shut up and do it. He hands it all over and quits. I see Buddy, with a new partner, a few weeks later. He's got a pay stub for about 15 paychecks worth of earnings. Company got caught for all the overtime pay, and a pretty substantial fine on top of that. Added bonus, the second in command had driven over a nail when he parked his silver BMW on the loading dock and had a flat when he came out of the store. He opened his trunk and called me over and said, "Change that for me." I told him sorry, that's not my job, and if I hurt myself, my compensation claim would be denied. As he went in to call a tow truck, I stood on the loading dock and gazed upon all the havoc I had wrought, and my heart was glad. The next one is a petty revenge story. So I am Romanian by birth, and my work takes me through this end of the world all the way up north to Poland. I was in Bucharest about a week ago, a city I know fairly well due to a seriously misspent youth. I was walking down the road when a man stopped to talk to me, offer me a drink voucher at a local bar. What he didn't realize at the time, as I knew I was a mark, and due to said misspent youth knew I was having my pocket picked. Thankfully, I keep a dummy wallet in my pants seat pocket and all valuables like cash and cards someplace else. But needless to say, I knew the moves to this scam. So I let them finish. They walk off, turn down an alley, and duck into cover. So I followed, introduced myself to them and how I knew their scam. I felt the guy take it, and if he opens it up, he can see it's just got slips of paper that look like currency, and fake cards. Needless to say, I put my arms around the 2 gents, patted their shoulders, and said better luck with the next make, and made off with both of their wallets without them knowing. I later turned the wallets in at the local authority and told them of 2 pickpockets who were targeting marks in this area. Here is the wallets they dropped with all cash and stuff still in it. I'm not a thief, but most importantly, it had the youth's IDs in it, and man did they have a rap sheet for minor theft. So if they want the US equivalent of roughly $7,000 back, they need to go to the authorities, ID themselves, and get booked for the outstanding charges, or be out at least a 2-week take. You can take the kid off of the street, you can't take the street out of the kid. The next one is a malicious compliance story. A few years ago, I worked at a janky 2-bit company. The boss thought he was Billy Big Bollocks and God's gift simultaneously. He had such a big head, I'm surprised he could get through doorways. He used to drink beer at his desk for lunch and would often arrive at work late. He was also an insufferable muscle bro and walked around as if carrying rolls of carpet under each arm. Prick. A few months into my time there, the company starts winning large orders, so he asked me to set up a small-scale production line to increase capacity and tells me the new hire will be situated there. I design it, set it up, test it all works, and I'm feeling a sense of pride with what I've accomplished. It worked like a dream. I was confident it would work really well for the new hire. Because I'm an engineer by trade, everything was perfect and only I knew how to fix the broken crap. Nobody else asked how it worked before making some very detrimental decisions. A while later, there was an issue. He couldn't hire anyone willing to accept such a crappy wage and boring work. So Billy Big Bollocks had a bright idea to demote me and make me governor of my creation. No way, not for £9K less. I immediately started job hunting, and I told him if that's your final offer, regard tomorrow as my final day. He panics that he's committed the company to a £1M order due for shipping in 3 days' time. During his alcohol-fueled panic, he tells me to write up highly detailed technical manuals and processes for my replacement. The production line included some precise handwork. Piss off, I can't do that in 1 day. He also didn't specify what they should contain, and considering I had no help from him with this project, just complaints, I thought I'd duck it. So sure, he got his manuals. I created Word documents with convincing titles like Technical Manual, Product Version 2.0, and How to Do This Precise Task. Inside the documents were, for example, the surprised Pikachu face, and Bubbles from Trailer Park Boys looking lost. Then below just one line of text reading, "This manual contains all the information I could find or was given." The file sizes would also indicate a lot of text was contained within thanks to the images. Therefore, at face value, they looked legitimate. I saved them to my laptop in an equally legitimate-looking folder that afternoon. Early the next morning, I came to work to collect my belongings and do some handovers, and found the laptop had vanished. I said my goodbyes to my colleagues and looked over to see him looking incensed with a beer in one hand. He was so angry he didn't look up from his desk. A friend told me later that the company missed the production deadline, despite him working 12-hour days to try to catch up. Apparently the client was extremely ducked off. Don't screw over good people. Prick. The next one is an entitled people story. Going to try and set the scene a bit here. My house backs onto a number of flats. I have a little terrace garden out the back that is linked to my property. Below that terrace is a small patio area that is linked to the flats, which they can get access to by their own back door. There are then steps up to my area which are gated off. I also have a locked gate that allows access to the terrace/garden because I live on a main road. A few months ago, the flat behind me had a problem with their plumbing, and the drain behind was overflowing with literal crap. Obviously an extremely nasty situation for everybody. When the owner of the flats, we will call him T, asked if he could come round the back and check the drain, of course we said yes because we're not total a-holes. After he checked the drain, he said he'd need somebody to come out, check it, and drain it. We agreed, but made it clear we would need to be made aware before it happened. As stipulated in our rental agreement with the letting agent, he said fine, and we got notice before any work was done so we could ensure our gate was unlocked. I thought that was the end of it, and boy was I wrong. A few weeks later, I was at home and heard my front gate open. I found it odd because my boyfriend wasn't due home from work for a little while, and nobody knocked on the door. The door to my house is immediately next to the gate, so it's seconds between the gate opening and a knock. When the gate went a second time, I looked outside to find T walking away. Obviously, he had entered my property without my consent, wanting to give him the benefit of the doubt, believing that he just wanted to check the drain one last time. I didn't say anything about it, just letting it slide. A couple of days later, my boyfriend, who had given him his number to deal with the drain issue, got a phone call from him, saying he needed to gain access to the back of our property and why did we have our gate locked. As my boyfriend said, we were both at work and neither could come home to deal with his request and if he needed something to speak to the letting agents. He just hung up. I spoke to my boyfriend and we collectively came to the decision that we would keep the gate locked at all times, even when we were in, because I didn't feel comfortable him just walking into my property as and when he felt like it, and he did not like that. The next time he tried to get in, my boyfriend was at home and I was at work. When he opened the gate, he got a stream of abuse from T, asking why we had locked the gate when he had permission to have access to the back when he wants, and there is a note in our rental agreement to state this. He threatened to get solicitors on us if we didn't leave the gate open or give him a key to get in when he wanted. It was here, he said, because he had renovated the house, he deserved to gain access on his terms, even though he wasn't our landlord. My boyfriend just told him to take it up with the letting agent if there was a problem and shut the door on his face. When I got home, I combed through my rental agreement and there was no such note in place. The only thing I could find about access was we require 24 hours notice for any work or access to the property, including the garden, unless it was urgent and they required access sooner. But they still had to provide detail in writing about any work that would be done even within 24 hours. Because of this, I told the letting agent, who had communication with T, that he would have to ask for access to my garden via them, and I require the written notice as stipulated in my contract. They agreed to pass the message on. Things cooled a bit, but the problem with the drains started again. We could see it was overflowing, and apparently T was aware, but we hadn't heard anything from him or the letting agent about when somebody would come and deal with it. This was when I got my own back. I'm probably a bad person for this, but at this stage I had enough. T turned up with the drainage company on a day that I was at home unwell. I was lying on the sofa when I heard a van pull up and somebody try to open the gate, but of course it was locked. The bell went and I considered getting up and answering the door, but when I heard T's voice I decided I wasn't going to feed his entitlement. I just lay back down, stuck my earplugs in, and tried to go back to sleep. For the next 30 or so minutes he tried to get in, constantly ringing the bell, knocking loudly on my window, shouting into the house, screaming at what I can only assume was my boyfriend on the phone, but I ignored it all. Eventually he got the message and left. When my boyfriend came home from work, he came back to give us a verbal dressing down, threatening legal action again, etc., because he needed access to the property and we didn't provide it. I pointed out that neither of us were in when he turned up. My blinds were shut and nobody can see in, so he didn't know I was off sick. And he didn't give us the agreed notice that he would require access, and in the future I will no longer be dealing with him. If he wants access to go through the letting agent, and the next time I find him in my garden, I'm ringing the police for trespassing. He was still threatening me, so I told him to go for it because I get free legal advice due to a membership I had, and if he really wants to go down that route, be my guest. I've honestly never seen somebody shut up so quickly. He said he'd go through the letting agent in the future, and I said good choice, and shut the door in his face. After that, he solely dealt with the letting agent and followed all instructions once he knew I had access to free legal advice. The best part about this whole incident was, he could have checked the drain from his own property and never needed access to my garden. He just wanted to flex his muscles and thought he could bully us because we're a young couple. The next one is an entitled parent story. Okay, this happened a long time ago, but my extended family is entitled as Duck, so you'll see me around a lot. In today's story, we will go back to 2011. My uncle, my mom's brother, and his wife were always the kind of people to idiot about anything that people would do with their life. Anyway, back in 2011, my brother was graduating high school and was about to start university. By that time, my parents were deciding if they should buy him an iPad so he wouldn't have to be carrying heavy books around. He needed to take pictures of the board. He took it with the iPad, browsing information while studying, browse it in the iPad instead of the computer, basically using the iPad as some sort of big library for his studies. My dad at the time told my uncle about his predicament because he had never used an iPad while he studied, and he didn't want to waste a couple of $100 just for it to be treated like a toy or just not used at all. My uncle and aunt immediately flipped over and started saying that buying an iPad or any kind of tablet was a waste of money and that my brother wouldn't do crap with that. My brother was upset. He wanted his iPad. He thought that carrying an iPad and a notebook around was better than carrying a bunch of books, calculator, many notebooks, and sometimes a laptop around. Anyway, a couple of months passed. We are in November. My brother started university in September. If this is necessary in my country, unless the university is in another state, people usually stay with their parents while studying. On November, we went to my uncle and aunt's apartment to celebrate my cousin's birthday. At that moment, it was her second birthday. My cousin is about to get fussy until my uncle gets a tablet out of nowhere and gives it to her. My dad asks my uncle why he gave a tablet to a baby, And my uncle says he discovered that with a tablet, my cousin doesn't get fussy while on planes. They used to travel a lot when my cousin was a baby. We are talking and stuff. And my aunt decided to take pictures. She then takes another tablet. My mother asks her about her old digital camera. My aunt just said that it was old and she needed something new. That day, none of us said a thing. We just went back to our house after celebrating that birthday and didn't say a thing. The next day, my dad took my brother to get him his iPad. My brother did use his iPad for university. It was 1 or 2 games, but it had majorly books or engineering-related apps. On Christmas, the dinner was on my parents' house, as always, and the moment my brother took his iPad, my aunt and uncle went crazy, stating that my dad just wasted money and that my brother would just use it to play games, to which my mom, stone cold, replied with, "Like your 2-year-old daughter?" They went silent. Anyway, they tried to badmouth my brother's iPad every chance they could, but my parents learned to not take my uncle seriously. Thank you for watching. I would really appreciate it if you could like the video and subscribe to our channel if you haven't already. We'll see you again tomorrow.